Let me get another chair. Yeah, you might be different. It's all about RGB. Why don't we do this? Why don't we pull this chair up? There we go. Easy breezy. Me, yeah, no, sorry. There we go. All right, so Brad, you ready? All right. So yeah, I'm just gonna. I'll pull Mr. Mayor up. And where do you? I was. You want to sit on the table? I was gonna. I thought you had to leave, so I was gonna pull you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna.
So what do I do? Just
I was gonna. Whatever you want to say. I was gonna recognize the mayor to make some comments, and then
yeah, have
recognize
the
you
mayor
to
and
make.
then invite me.
Yeah, and then I was gonna let you.
Yeah.
And then I'll recognize Dr. Solis for the.
Yeah.
Go from there.
Okay.
Good
Yeah,
to see
I'll
you.
probably just say a couple of my thoughts on it.
Perfect. Yeah, whatever you want.
Okay.
As long as you're okay. All right, we'll go ahead and start. So I appreciate everyone coming this morning. Obviously, CBP has been down for our Coac meeting for the last couple of days, and we thought it'd be a good idea to take advantage of leadership being here to have a town hall this morning to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing in this environment, obviously with the migrant crisis really impacting RGB, Laredo, and other things like that. But also the importance of Laredo as, what is it, JD, the number 1 port in the country? Yeah, he's, as JD, yeah, that's right. Yeah, as Coac member, JD Gonzalez has reminded us repeatedly, so very proud of that. So anyway, thank you all for being here this morning. I think this will be an instructive discussion. So before we get into the panel, I'd like to recognize Mayor Pete Sines for a couple of comments, and thank you for being here this morning, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, the assistant, the commissioner, for being with us, and of course all the other folks as well. Yeah, we know, and I don't necessarily know your specific names, but very much welcome. Bienvenidos a Laredo, Texas. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This is a momentous occasion for us here too. As you know, as of last week, I believe that we were the #1 port throughout the U.S., and we gotta announce that because. Who knows for how long? But it's not because we're not trying. We've been trying so hard for years and years. These folks here are the successors of Mr. Michaelinen, who now has taken a DHS position. We know him well. We expect to know you very well as well because he was here and he was so involved in the border issues. These are the folks that make Laredo happen, the Border Patrol and of course Customs, CBP, the officers. We politicians like to take credit for it, but basically much of that credit belongs to all of you all. The fact that you're there, that you do your jobs very well, and we need you here as well. We need more people in the border. Laredo, as you all know, is very friendly to our federal agencies, and particularly these two branches here, and we expect more cooperation, more collaboration from these folks, and of course us as well. Private industry, thank you. Our college president, Dr. Solis, thank you, and we see other trustees as well. Thank you so much, and of course our congressman. I usually say that the footprints basically here too, everywhere, or the footprints of our congressman, because he's been our champion, our leader for so many years, and we expect him to be back and do what he does, and that's succeed and lead our region, community, and of course our country. We expect good things from this conversation. So again, thank you, bienvenidos, y que viva Laredo.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been joking with JD the whole time that after your term is up, he was, I call him the mayor, so. But thank you for those comments, and thank you for welcoming us to Laredo. I think we've had everyone, at least that's come down from DC, and our corporate partners on Coac, have been blown away by the hospitality and the food, quite frankly. So now I'll turn it over to a very good friend of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Representative Henry Cuellar. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I would certainly want to welcome all of y'all. Some are from here, some are from DC, but I certainly want to say welcome to the number one port. When Laredo surpassed LA, I said that to my congressional friends from LA. The article didn't hear anything from them, but I think they got the picture. I do want to say thank you, appreciate it. I enjoyed working with the former commissioner, Kevin McEnany. He does a great job. I will say this, and it's sometimes rare for me to say about the secretaries. This Homeland Secretary is going to be good. Kevin McEnany does a heck of a job. He understands the border. He listens to people, and I hope that he becomes the permanent secretary because he really, really gets it. The new CBP commissioner, I know we've been missing each other. He'll call me, and appropriation takes a little longer, but I think we're supposed to try this week again, and we're going to try again. One of the things that I also wanted to do I was talking to Bobby Babcock, who's the regional director for GSA, and this is Brad, what we were talking about yesterday. We had a little interesting time yesterday when we were talking about getting GSA and CBP to work together. But we're going to sit down and talk to him about the Center of Excellence, where we can make a lot of the decisions. We're hoping CBP, GSA, the local agencies can do decisions here. Yesterday, we were working on all these different projects, the fast lanes. And sorry to give you some details, but I want you to understand what's going on. So we're at the World Trade Bridge, we're doing a lot of work. And we've been meeting mayor, and I want to thank the mayor because the mayor has just been fantastic on our leadership on this. And of course, your folks here locally, Brad and the famous David Higgerson. Where is David Higgerson anyway? Did y'all put him away? Is he playing golf already? No. Do not answer that question. I'm just kidding. So we're talking about the donation plan. So there's a master donation plan already, and then GSA will say, well, you need to get signatures, and not the local signatures, but you got to go back to DC over a temporary fast lane, the asphalt, so we can start moving this. It was just incredible. So one of the things I'll be talking to Sanders, and we've been talking about, the idea from y'all is to have a center of excellence where GSA and CBP and other interested parties can do decisions locally. Because if we have to go to DC every time, keep in mind that the cities don't work on 5, 10-year plans on budgets. It's a 1-year plan. And sometimes they have the money, and if we don't use the money, it's going to be gone. So we got to find a way that we expedite this so we can get the entry levels. What we've been talking about yesterday, you're going to see the transformation of what comes out of the World Trade Bridge, the fast lane. I think eventually, once it's permanent, it'll be about 30% of the empties and the Sentry and the CPAC and all that will be going through that. So that will be just like TSA pre-clear. The exit, everybody talks about that low turn. We're going to soften that famous turn out of there. The lanes will be expanded from 1 to 3 outside. The millions of dollars that the Texas and federal dollars, state dollars are using for Loop 20 and all that, overpasses are going to come in because we want to build the capacity for the World Trade Bridge, so we appreciate that. But we also want to make sure that y'all follow up on the plan that y'all had about putting a tower and doing the Wi-Fi and all that, because we want to make sure that the World Trade Bridge remains as the #1 port that we have. So we're going to do our part, but we need your help also. We also want y'all to follow up on the one-stop center campus. Well, we want to put CBP, Border Patrol, ICE, Air Marine at the base. I know we got a little distracted because of the shutdown last year, but we're hoping that we can follow up on that idea. It'll be the first time that we have all those units together at a one-stop center. The city's a partner. They want to work with y'all. We want to work with you, so we want you to follow up on those issues. Finally, let me just say about a couple things. In Congress, as you know, next week we should have the subcommittee on Homeland Appropriations, and we hope that we can continue doing what we've been doing. I am one of those Democrats that I support CBP, Border Patrol, and ICE. Anybody who thinks that we need to abolish ICE is just off. Completely on that. Those are the men and women, and I always say that about Border Patrol or anybody. Men and women have to follow the policies, and if there's a problem with some policies up there, that's a different thing. But we do not blame the men and women that have to do their jobs, because these guys do their job well, and we need to make sure that we support them. And as you said, Mayor, we got a lot of folks here, and we want to make sure that you understand that we support you. Now, sometimes we might disagree on one issue called the wall. The only thing I ask on the wall, we don't want to be obsessed. We do understand, like, for example, the Border Union, the Border Patrol Union, I always say, what's their position post 2012 or pre-2012? Because before 2012, they were against the wall. They said it was a waste of taxpayers' money and all that. Now they changed the position. I understand that. And, you know, I don't want to get into the debate, but the only thing we ask is for y'all to consider this, is you got to have local input. The local input is very important. In 2008 on the Secure Act, I added language about local input. But the local input, quite honestly, has been, hey, we're going to put a wall. What do you think? We don't like it. Okay, we're still going to have it. Here's our design, and this is the only way we're going to do it. We have to have real input from the local community. In fact, one of the first fences in the state of Texas was here, and it was locally driven. The college, where's Ricardo? Oh, there you are, Ricardo, and Mercurio also, Mercurio. It was locally, and the president was right here, and they said, hey, here's an input. Now, it might be not the beautiful wall that some people want, but it's a fence. The bulkhead is another thing that we want. So the only thing we ask is let the local communities have input, and you'll be surprised what happens if you get local input. Finally, on the appropriation bill, just to highlight a couple things, I was part of the conference committee. A couple things that I wanted, I put language there for local input in the valley on the wall, but I also, we added money for 600 no CBP officers, appropriations, and then fees for another 600. And, you know, we want to make sure that that happens as quickly as possible. We also added money for retention, and I think now the 5% is kicking in for Border Patrol, because, as you know, Border Patrol is losing, at one time they were losing more people than they were hiring. I think you're still short of 2,000. I disagree that we hire a vendor where we pay him $290 million. Glad that that contract is out. When you pay $14.8 million to start off at 2 Border Patrol, there's something wrong with that. I'd rather give that money to y'all and do retention, pay raises for Border Patrol. Same thing with CBP. We got to make sure that we support them. But the other thing that is important for our area is when 300 of the Laredo sector CBP officers were taken down to the valley, we took the blunt of it. And I told the commissioner, I think on a Friday I was talking to him, on a Sunday he became secretary. And I said, Commissioner, Secretary, we can't take the brunt. We're the largest area when it comes to trade. I said, you got to share the pain with other areas. Look at the retirees, look at pay, overtime, ask us. Don't transfer money for walls, transfer money for pay raises or overtime. And I'm glad that we're getting some of our folks in. But one of the things that I want, and I need your help in talking to some of my folks in Congress, is I want to set up what David Higgers and other folks had said, Rudy Karich down there in the valley, is to do the entry-level positions. I know you all have technical names for it, but I'll call it entry levels. Those folks will do everything they do except carry a gun. But those folks are not going to be babysitting, are not going to be changing diapers, are not going to be taking people to hospitals. Border Patrol cannot spend 40% of their time away instead of being at the border. And CBP should be inspecting cargo, tourism, because it's important. So we want to have those entry-level positions to make sure that not only they do that work and your men and women can do the work that they got hired, the professionals that they are, but it becomes a pool that you can say, hey, here's somebody, an entry-level position that we can hire as Border Patrol or CBP officer. So those are the things that we're looking. Technology, we got to move faster in technology. I know that CBP says, oh, we're moving fast, but when I talk to the stakeholders, they're saying something different. So there's a disconnect, Brenda, on this, and I know I've talked to the Commissioner Secretary about it, but if we put money for technology, especially at the ports, we got to move a lot faster on it. I know the Commissioner or the Secretary has said yes, but when I talk to the stakeholders, they have a different story, so we gotta somehow find a way to connect that on the technology. Keep working with Mexico. Laredo was the first area that had joint inspections. We worked on it. If you recall, we were at the Ruth Chris and, well, I shouldn't say, we were at a restaurant in Mexico, meeting with Alfredo Gutierrez Mina, who's now Supreme Court Justice. He was head of SET. And we talked about this in Laredo, and I know it got delayed because carrying guns over there, but it finally got worked out. Laredo was the first area, not only at the airport now, but we have it at the train, at a rail crossing, at our two bridges, and we want to see that expanded, working with the Mexicans, and even do more than what we're doing on that. It's a good start, but I think we can do a lot more working with them. Finally, on this area, I know we have folks from the trains here. I think Union Pacific is here, and international cruise. Again, I want to make sure that we balance this with our Teamsters, but the way Kansas City's been doing it, it has worked. They have not lost any jobs. In fact, they've hired more people, and I think their average pay is at $70,000 to start off. Now, sometimes our labor folks are saying they're losing jobs. They're not losing jobs. Because if you have more trains crossing, if we go from 22 to 24, 25, and eventually a lot more, that means you need more engineers. You need more people there because you're going to have more trains, more money for gas and supplies that the trains are going to use. So it's good for us. But the most important thing, Mayor, what does it do? It stops the trains from blocking miles of blocks and blocks, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get to 100%, and that will be a big plus. So we need to make sure that we support the international cruise. Eventually, I want Americans to go over there. You know, not only Mexicans coming this way, but the international cruise is something that sometimes there's a lot of misinformation that we see. But we want to make sure that we're innovative, that we're creative, that we think about what we need to do to make sure that we do local decisions like what Brad does here. I know we had our folks over at TAMU also, where we put the Center of Excellence. You all had no space, so TAMU said, hey, here's space. If you talk to Ricardo, I'm sure he'll find ways that we can do this. And one of the things that we want to do also is to, on those new entry-level positions, the way the South Texas College is doing, we want Laredo Community College to start training that. So we're going to work with FLECTEC to make sure that we have a curriculum like we're doing down there and get some of the training here because, Dr. Solis is one of the most innovative people that we've had here at the college, and they want to be. So it's cybersecurity, drones, if you're testing the small drones in this area, include them because I think they're certified by Homeland, right? Or whatever the right term is, certified. I'll use the word certified or approved by Homeland, so they can help on the drones and the cybersecurity. One of the few colleges in the state of Texas. So use our higher institutions like we did at TAMU and we can do here, and we just want to be partners here. So again, it's not us versus you. It's all of us together, and if we work as a team with the private sector, we can certainly make sure that instead of having $1.7 billion a day, we can increase it. I know the tariff issue, I called the White House. I was talking to the White House last night. I said, what are y'all doing, guys? And I hope that, I believe the Mexican foreign minister is flying in and spending a couple of days to try to smooth things in. We cannot afford a trade war. We have to focus on approving NAFTA 2.0. That's the focus, and we cannot be distracted. How we work with the Mexicans, we can go into something else. I have a lot of ideas, but I appreciate what Border Patrol does in securing our areas. I appreciate what CBP does here, and I appreciate all of y'all for being partners with our team here. It's a team, and thank you so much. At this time, I spent, I think, 4 hours yesterday with Border Patrol and the union last night, and members of Congress are here, so I'm gonna step out. But again, hopefully next week when we kick out the subcommittee, we'll have some good news on Homeland Appropriation. So thank you so much, and God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Representative Cuellar, thank you so much for those comments. As I mentioned, we had our Coac meeting down here, and the hospitality has been beyond reproach. We got to see a lot of the operations at World Trade Bridge and take some of our industry partners who are not from here to kind of tell the story of Laredo. Particularly, we got a tour of the border with our Border Patrol, and then through our OFO, we got to see World Trade Bridge and some of the operations there. Thank you, Armando Tabuada, for organizing all of that. I really want to appreciate all the support from your end. So with that, I was going to thank Dr. Solis, obviously, for hosting us here and for the Coac yesterday. So I'll recognize him when he comes back in. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and kick off the conversation. We've got a lot to talk about. As I said, this is focused kind of on what we're dealing with at the southern border, in particular our operations and how it's impacted us moving forward. So probably just launch into questions, but I'll make quick introductions of everybody on the stage. We've got to my left, Joel Martinez, who's the Deputy Chief Patrol Agent for this sector, for the Laredo sector. To his left, we've got, Acting Deputy Chief Patrol Agent John Morris from the RGV sector. To his left, we've got Executive Assistant Commissioner Brenda Smith, who runs our Office of Trade in Washington, D.C. And then I think a couple of you may know Brad Skinner, who Deputy Director of Field Operations here in Laredo. And I'm Bradley Hayes. By the way, I'm Executive Director for our Office of Trade Relations in Washington, D.C. So why don't we start, gentlemen, with Border Patrol. Maybe kind of we can do a compare and contrast. Talk about the flow that you're seeing coming through RGV, the flow we're looking at Laredo, what the differences are, and how's that different from what we've seen in the past. So Mr. Morris, why don't you start with RGV and then we'll turn it over and talk Laredo.
Absolutely, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. First of all, it's an honor to be back here in Laredo. I started my career here back in 1996, and it's been a decade, so a big treat to be able to come back, so we're very happy to be here. So in RGV, obviously, numbers that we've never seen down there, even when RGV was blowing up in the 1999s when I was working here, didn't see these. We're currently at 220,000 apprehensions for the year, barely halfway through the year, and last year we're only at 162,000 for the entire FY. So the current trend lines put us somewhere between 370 and 440,000 apprehensions for the year. Most of that continues to be OTMs, family units, and UACs. And the main reason I point that out is because over the history of the Border Patrol, they were not Central Americans, right? We had contiguous country, much easier to process. This takes a lot of manpower. And so my good friend, Deputy Martinez here, we find ourselves having to ask folks for help. We have to ask, hey, Laredo, can you take people from us? Coast Guard, can you help us? FEMA, DHS, National Guard, Army, etc. It's a big draw on our manpower. And as the Congressman mentioned a while ago, about a month ago, we had 40% of our personnel tied up into this, and we're actually up to 50% now. So 50% of our entire sector is dedicated to the processing of this humanitarian issue, and we still need the help from everybody, which includes, and I think most important to this group here, Customs and Border Protection officers that should be out at POEs and doing that work, but unfortunately, I'm glad that they're helping us, but we have a lot of people outside of their mission sets having to come help us with this flow.
So Joel, talk about what we're seeing here in Laredo. I know that the team who took us out on the tour 2 days ago, we got to drive along the border and see some of the challenges there, and they kind of informed us a little bit about what the flow is like here as opposed to RGV. So if you'll expand on that, that'd be great.
Right, it's a vast difference actually, because here, unlike Laredo, people are actually trying to get away from us. Reason being is RGV is having thousands of people come at them and looking for the green shirts. Here they're not. And that has turned into a humanitarian crisis in its own, because we are seeing more stash houses, more 18-wheeler cases. In fact, just to give you a little number here, we're looking at 60% more trailer cases as of last year, and 84% more stash houses. So why the big difference? Well, south of us is the headquarters for the Cartel Noreste. They have the vast control of anything that goes across the border, either in or out. That has a lot to do, and their reputation. They have a very violent reputation. That goes out to Central America, and they pretty much want to try to avoid this area. So anybody that does come into this area is actually trying to get away, because they're paying a little bit of extra money to get through here. This is a Pan American highway, right? 35 all the way, goes all the way to Minnesota. So this is a pristine area in the cartel world. So how are we helping out RGV? Right now we're accepting 4 bus loads from them, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna increase if their traffic increases. 4 bus loads, and that's about 30 to 40% of our manpower goes to help these children out. We're getting unaccompanied children, the family units, straight from the river, mind you, because John's facilities can't handle any more bodies. So from the bus loads up to the riverbanks, they come straight to Hebbronville. From there, we disperse them into our stations, and from there we do medical assessments and everything else. So that's how it becomes a national security issue, because instead of our agents being on the line, we're taking care of these family units and these children, which is of our utmost importance to us, is the well-being of these children. And most of them are coming in sick, and we're rendering the aid that they need.
It's amazing to be down here from DC. I know that, you know, we get visuals and pictures up there, but to see it up close and personal is something else altogether. And this is a crisis the likes of which we've not really seen before. You know, and as you've mentioned, we've had to pull assets from other internal components to help support Border Patrol. So with that, you know, Brad, I know the number, I think we've pulled 731 so far. So how has pulling officers from various ports around the country impacted OFO operations? And as we move into the busy summer months, is there an anticipated impact on travel and trade?
Yeah, certainly. Glad to take the question, and thank you, Mr. Hayes, for organizing the event. Colleagues, good to see everybody in the audience here this morning. I'll start by first echoing Representative Cuellar's comments about all of the great trade initiatives that are taking place here within the Laredo corridor and throughout our field office. Without the collaboration, the cooperation with our trade partners, we could not do what we have accomplished already. And I just think it really speaks to the machine that we have in place here in Laredo that makes things work. So I want to say, first of all, my thanks to the trade community for all the support that you give us. I also want to give a big shout out to our port director, Albert Flores, who is here with us, all of the men and women in blue, our trade team. Everybody is really contributing here as we go forward. As far as the humanitarian crisis that is taking place, a couple of things I think to kind of unpack this for everybody. Mr. Hayes mentioned, so to address the humanitarian, the border security crisis, Office of Field Operations, the men and women in blue, our officers who man the ports of entry, have been supporting Border Patrol operations up and down the southwest border. As far as within the Laredo Field Office, which I'm responsible for, we support the RGV sector, and Deputy Morris really painted the picture, right, of the numbers that they are experiencing down there. But we're also supporting Laredo sector and Del Rio sector as well. In terms of when this first started back in March, late March, early April, just to give the audience some context, we, the Laredo Field Office, had to deploy 300 officers from the Laredo Field Office to RGV sector. We did that in a matter of 72 hours. That was all in-house resources from the field office, our officers. Once we deploy to RGV sector from all of our ports, and of course Port Laredo is our largest port within the field office, and quite a of those 300, quite a significant percentage was from the Laredo. Obviously, we saw delays, cargo processing time, right? Because we had to move officers down. We had to take some of our trade professionals to fill in the vehicle and pedestrian areas as well. We were able to do that, and then with the support of our Executive Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Owen, we were then able to replenish the officers that we were sending from the field office with officers from across all of our ports of entry. So just a little context there. So there's 19 field offices. If you think of Laredo as one of those field offices, 19 field offices. Over half the field offices in the country, over 50 ports and officers from 50 ports of entry have come down to replenish our officers so that then we could take our officers back to the ports of entry. Those officers have been taken strategically from the various ports and in increments, hopefully so as not to impact greatly wait time. So and what I'm talking about here is from airports, seaports, northern border ports as well. We expect as we go into the summer months, especially at the airport operation, there will probably be a bump up in wait times just because of those resources. But I know the agency and our division particularly is working really hard to mitigate that to ensure that there is no dramatic increase to delays at the airport, seaports, or on the northern border. I think as we move into the summer months, peak travel and tourism time, you'll probably see some of that. Here within the Laredo field office, I would say likewise. Summer months tend to be quite heavy for us, both with respect to trade and travel. Now that basically here in Laredo, we've got about a little over, Laredo field office, a little over 100 officers supporting the RGB sector. When you look at that in the total scope of our workforce, it is a manageable percentage for us. In that it would work as well here for in the Laredo port or the Laredo port of entry. So we're going to work hard over the coming months to ensure that they're to mitigate the disruptions. But as I've said to different groups out here, I had a chance to meet with the trucking industry not too long ago. I think what you are seeing presently here at World Trade, Columbia, for instance, that's pretty much what you can expect as we go forward, barring any additional ramp up of operation or deployments to support our colleagues at Border Patrol. A couple of things that I would just want to get out on the table for everybody. As we have always said here from the field office, we are going to let the trade community, we're going to let the local community know as quickly as we can if we have to redeploy resources to support Border Patrol, we will let the community know as quickly as possible. Because I know you all need predictability, you all need to be able to plan for your cargo movements that are coming forward. Second point for me, just to share or get out with the group, we really need your help in a couple of areas. One, rumor control. I think when the first deployment happened, several probably saw this fake news, DHS is shutting down the border, right? Of course, that was not the case. Anytime you see this, and I think this group especially knows who to come to, you can come to myself, you can come to your port directors, ground truth those issues, right? First and foremost. Excessive delays, wait times. I've seen some reports in the media, right, about 9-10 hour wait times. What I can report to this group, and again, I'm going to come back to my opening there, I think it's really a tribute to what we've been able to do as a community here. Yes, we have seen additional wait times as a result of the surge at, for instance, World Trade Bridge, but not dramatic. I was just looking at the numbers from yesterday, and pretty much we are in line with now with what we were doing in terms of processing time at this time last year. So I think that's good news, and I think that works to some efficiencies that the port is putting into play. But if you start to hear these numbers, and I hear some of this coming from especially the Mexico shippers, we will look at this. We will look at this on a, try to break it down, understand exactly where it is. A lot of times the wait times get pushed over to us at CBP, but we know there are different parts in this supply chain, right? We've got the Mexico side of this, the Mexican customs brokerage. From time to time they will have system outages, but case by case we will certainly work to mitigate those. And then I guess at the point here, and we've seen some positive here. We are always going to stress to the trade community, take advantage of the existing hours of operation, and especially those early morning hours. That's where we tend to see underutilized capacity, right? So I'm talking that 7 to 11 time frame. I think we've actually seen some uptake there. I've also heard reports where Columbia Bridge, we're starting to see some uptake in using Columbia and some of that underused capacity that's over there. So put a lot out there on the table for you, Mr. Hayes, but I can tell you, for this group, everybody does pull together. I know everybody is very interested as when this is going to um, come to an end, but as the deputy and Mr. Martinez spoke to, I personally, as we go into the summer months here, I do not see that this is going to diminish greatly, and we, OFO, are going to necessarily be supporting Border Patrol. So again, it really comes down to what you see now is pretty much what you're going to be working forward going forward. Back over to you, sir.
Yeah, that's right. And to echo what you said, I know even coming from the top, from Executive Assistant Commissioner Owen, I think OFO and the team at CBP has done a great job of pushing out information and really operating under radical transparency, as the new commissioner likes to say, and will continue to do so. So as Mr. Skinner said, yeah, if you hear rumors that don't seem like they're right, please reach out to us and let us know. And I think what was interesting to another point you made in terms of OFO readjusting who and where, from which officers are deployed to help Border Patrol. I think we were at a checkpoint on Wednesday, and two of the officers, I believe, are from the New York field office. So you've been very strategic in listening to the trade, and I think we've gotten good feedback that initially we may have pulled a little too heavy from the southern border, but I think OFO has done a tremendous job of figuring out where to come from so as to mitigate, like you said, those challenges. So Executive Assistant Commissioner Smith, first of all, down from DC, who runs our Office of Trade. She's been with us for our Coac meeting for the last couple of days, so glad you're here to join us. Obviously we've been talking numbers, and they're incredibly high, and the strain and demand that puts on both our CBP officers and agents out in the field. So from a trade perspective, what efforts are we undertaking to automate, revise processing and procedures to help better facilitate legitimate trade during this time?
So, thank you, Bradley, and thank you all for such a very, very warm welcome. A lot of familiar faces coming back to Laredo, which is great. Not just Brad Skinner, but many of you in the audience. So I just wanted to start by thanking you for the hospitality. The other thing that I would observe is I am, as always, so impressed with the partnership that Brad talked about, Mayor talked about, Congressman Cuellar talked about, that is so evident here in Laredo. And I will tell you, I don't see it anywhere else to the level that you have it here. Between your state and city and federal governments, your private sector, the brokerage, the shipping community, the manufacturers, I think you recognize and have pulled together to make Laredo a hub of trade, and it's very clear that your efforts are succeeding. The resilience that you've built into your system, I think, through a couple of things, through your open communication, through having the collaboration not only with those entities that I just mentioned, but also with the other government agencies, the Food and Drug Administration, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Fish and Wildlife Service, and most importantly, the Mexican government. Really critical, I think, to being able to accommodate and manage the bumps that you are experiencing now. This time of change in the economic environment is really a challenge across the country, really globally. There's some very strong messages being sent by this administration to China, to some of our partners through the steel industry, about the way that fair and free trade should work. And we've deviated off that path of fair and free trade in the larger trade economy over many years. And I think one of the things this administration is looking for is to try to get things back in line so that the U.S. economy, U.S. businesses, U.S. consumers are able to benefit from a very active and prosperous trade. As I look at some of the things here in Laredo that you've done, where you've streamlined processes, where you looked at your infrastructure. I remember very clearly, I was here probably 2 or 3 years ago, and and had the opportunity to stand right by World Trade Bridge. And I'm not sure if Mr. Flores remembers this conversation, but we were being hosted by the mayor and by some of the other local officials. And they turned to Mr. Flores, who I believe was APD at the port, for trade, at the port at that point. And they said, if you could change one thing, what would you do? And he said, I'd run a lane right up. And I take off the empties and I take the fast lane. And the whole group, and it was fascinating to watch, said, that's a great idea. We're going to do it. And so it was great when I was here on Wednesday to stand in almost exactly that same place and see that it's about to happen. That is the kind of partnership that I think we need to duplicate around the country. Your efforts to look at your infrastructure, look at your processes. We've done a lot of work over the last 5 years to take paper out of the process. I know there's still some, but paper slows things down. We can do things electronically in advance through ACE and single window, use technology like the new NII, and being able to be more flexible with our ability to see into containers, to see into trucks so we don't have to unload. Do organizational changes. I was so impressed with the Centers of Excellence and Expertise that I saw here in Laredo, where you have representatives of the 10 Centers of Excellence and Expertise that are taking a national view, which takes some of the duplication of effort out and allows us to both focus on risk and focus on streamlining the sort of business information and decisions that you need out of your day-to-day processes. That, I think, is very evident here in Laredo. We've taken the opportunity to, I would say, take the model that's existing in Laredo and build on it from a national perspective. We have an effort called 21st Century Customs Framework, where we are recognizing that these disruptions that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis are just the way we do business now. Whether it's disruptions from the government, disruptions from the way the economy works, disruptions through manufacturing process or business models. And what we've said is, what do we want our 21st century trade framework to look like? So we've provided a number of opportunities for public comment. We held a big public meeting in Washington on March 1st. We had over 1,000 people participate in that meeting, either in person. We actually had more people on the phone, listening to the conversation, providing us input into what is necessary for a vibrant and prosperous and transparent trade model. We would ask you to continue to engage with us. We'll have a number of modernization projects and we'll need to test them. J.D. Gonzalez is your voice into at least a large part of that process through his membership and representation on the Coac. I would encourage you to inundate J.D. with information about what needs to change. How can Laredo, and by extension the rest of the country, become resilient enough to prosper while absorbing changes? And I'll end there.
Yeah, like there. That one. All right, that one working. So I'll echo what A.C. Smith said in terms of what we've seen the partnership like here. It's been impressive what the public-private partnership between our officers and agents and CBP and industry down here and state and local leaders has been. It's I think really a model that can be should be replicated across the country, and also echo what A.C. Smith said about JD being a very good representation of the southern border, not just Laredo. And it's important that we have that voice on the Coac, and it's unfortunate that he doesn't really have a personality and he's such a timid figure because we don't ever hear from him, but that's all right. So let's turn back, to John and Joel. We've talked about the numbers and how staff is being dedicated to functions that aren't necessarily inherent to Border Patrol agents, the feed and caring of children, taking care of migrants, as you pointed out, which is of paramount importance to us. And so doing that, I think, obviously pulls people away from the broader mission of Border Patrol. So I'd just like to get your comments on, as we're seeing this crisis at the border and resources are being dedicated to other functions really outside of the Border Patrol agent scope of operations, what's the actual risk of not being able to fulfill our mission, particularly from a Border Patrol perspective? I'll turn it over to Joel first.
Well, Laredo, as I point out those numbers of the increase in stash houses and 18-wheelers, that for us is paramount. We've been lucky to get a couple of 18-wheelers lately, but unfortunately, the inevitable is going to happen. God forbid we miss one. That's what keeps me up at night, and also with the amount of people that we have in custody, our facilities are, if you've seen them, they're antiquated. Most of them were made in the 60s and 70s, and the infrastructure itself can't handle that. So my concern is the people inside those buildings as well, not just our agents, but the people that are in custody. So by pulling all these agents to do hospital watch, to transfer people in and out of the hospitals for one, which is daily, it's about at least 20 or 30 people a day going to the local hospitals here. That takes big time human effort, because we pull people from the field that are not processing already to go and take care of that. So that's how it affects us and the local community as well. So, John?
So everything Deputy Martinez just said, and then some. So in RGV, it's not just all Central Americans. We've apprehended people from 57 different countries already. And that includes places like Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, Bangladesh, from all over the world. So there's this flow of people outside of this humanitarian piece that you're seeing on the news. So in addition to the 222,000 we've already apprehended this year alone, there's about 32,000 that we know of that got away from us, which either is a detection through a camera, some type of sensor, what have you. So in addition to everything else he said, the things that keep me up at night are, there's this entire population that we don't even know that came through. We didn't catch them, we didn't detect them, and no, we didn't catch them. Who else are they? Every day across the Border Patrol, and including RGV, and I surmise Laredo, but I'll speak just for RGV, there's aggravated felons, people with active warrants, and we're talking bad crimes. And I won't go into details, but every day, and those are the ones we catch, then who else was in that 30,000 that we know got away, and then who else was in that group of people that we weren't even able to detect going forward that way. And so when you tag onto that, let's talk about the kids for a minute. So right now, we know for a fact, through a joint effort with CBP and ICE, about 30% of this family population coming through is fraudulent. Either they're not family members, or they're lying about the age of the juvenile, and so we're able to determine that's a fraudulent family unit. We don't have the capacity to interview thoroughly everybody that comes through. We're only interviewing about 10% of the folks that come through. What happens is through partnerships, right? So great partnerships, not just at the local level. Experienced them here in Laredo, we have the same thing in RGV between trade and law enforcement communities, but international partnerships, and I'm talking beyond Mexico, and let's talk Central America for a minute. We have partnerships. We find people regularly that family units we release into our country, right? The most generous country in the world. We have no idea who these people are. What happens to these children? And we've had, through our partnerships, find out that we release somebody with an active warrant in Guatemala that's wanted in El Salvador. And you go back and review the records, and we just released this person into the country with a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, and we have no way to track where these people are. So in addition to everything that Deputy Martinez said, there's a lot of things that keep me, the entire Border Patrol, CBP, and I would hope as a nation that we're really worried about, because we're having to deal with this humanitarian piece.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's eye-opening. Sorry. In terms of the challenges that we're facing just because of this migrant crisis. I know we're running up about 10 minutes left, and I want to leave some time for questions, but let me turn it to Brad for just one quick question about how staffing and hiring looks here in Laredo in terms for OFO.
So Most of the audience know me, my experience here in Laredo, starting on the trade side. About a year and a half ago, Director Higgerson asked me to step in as a deputy director, basically that chief operating officer for the entire field office. It's the only field office where we have my position in place. So I, not only the trade side, but I get to look at the entire organization, right? Border security, law enforcement, facilities, and our human capital, the staffing, the recruiting, the retention. Again, to go back to, we heard from Congressman Cuellar, and I know Congress has been very favorable to OFO overall in terms of staffing, increased officers throughout all of our field offices, including Laredo. Presently, what I could just share with the audience from a staffing perspective, we are in pretty good shape based upon our overall staffing numbers. Over the last 18 months, we've been able to reduce that time basically from the initial intake of applicants who want to be a part of the organization to actually getting them on board, trained and functioning out there at the vehicle lanes, primary, out in cargo as well. So we've taken that down from what was well over a year down to a matter of months. And in fact, the Laredo field office is kind of a part of a pilot project to fast track new hires into the organization. And we've been fortunate in that we've been able to overstaff, understanding that a lot of folks, of our officers are men and women that come to the southwest border. They're usually very new to the organization. Many want to move on to work at other ports of entry throughout the country. So we're kind of that training area for all of field operations when they come down. So overall, what I can report to the group, staffing wise, I think given our current numbers, we're looking good.
Again, see if it's, well, hold it back. So with that, why don't we open it up for some questions from the crowd. We've got a mic here in the middle of the room, so if you've got a question, please step to the mic, and if you'll identify yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ernesto Gaetan. I'm from the Laredo Motor Carriers Association. My question is regarding the trends that there are from the different criminal organizations. Can you guys tell us if there is any kind of trends that we should be aware of in the trade community? And also, I guess the question would be, can those be communicated to the trade community often?
You want me to take us first? I'll be glad to. Thank you, Mr. Gaetan, for the question. A couple of points to get out to the group, and I've spoken to your group several times. I think you always have to keep in mind that anytime there is a disruption, crisis such as we're going through right now, the bad guys, the drug traffickers, are going to try to take advantage of that opportunity. We all know about the tornado that hit World Trade Bridge, May of 2017. After that, during the midst of all of that chaos that was taking place, we saw the attempts of trying to push a lot of narcotics loads through, a lot of attempts to push migrants through the checkpoints. So what I've always said to the groups that are out there, when you see these types of situations happening, you really need to go to Code Red, right? From your perspective, you got to get your security folks on board, warning your drivers to be extra careful that there might be the additional opportunities there for the bad guys to put the narcotics in there. And I think it's interesting, we've got Director Manny Garza from the CTPAT program that's going to be speaking to a group later on this morning, and I'm sure he'll have a lot to share. What I can say from the cargo side of it, be extra vigilant in terms of deep concealment of narcotics in the loads. And then we're seeing a lot in the cabs of the trucks as well. Speaker boxes, fire extinguishers, choke blocks. Seeing a lot of methamphetamine that is coming in as well. So we need you, Ernesto, and especially the trucking and on the Mexico side, right, and your influence there to really bear down on that point. So that would give you a couple of things to start with. And then, of course, state of Tamaulipas. These gentlemen know this better than I do. This is prime drug trafficking organization territory, right? So that's just always something that we as a group are going to have to be dealing with.
Good morning. I'm Jerry Schwebel. And I want to thank everyone for being here, especially you, Brenda, for coming down. You were here from day one, and you've never resisted coming down here. You always want to come down here and hear us out, so I thank you for that. And I want to thank the whole team. I want to set the tone for this conversation because we're looking at finding solutions to our problems. For those of us that are down here in the trenches, what we're saying, that the crisis is not on the border, the crisis is in Washington, that they can't get the laws passed that we need for all of you to do their job better and for all of us to work better. So at the end of the day, we've got chaos. I'm a banker, Brad, and you and I have had this conversation before. I don't like to see long lines in my drive-through lanes, or I don't like to see long lines in my bank lobby. It's not good for business. Long lines are not good. Delays are not good for business, period. So I want to make sure that we don't send a message of saying that you're working within the resources you have available to you all. And you said it correctly, Brenda, the resiliency of those of us down here is commendable because at the end of the day, we control our own destiny, we make things happen. I have two questions. First of all, as someone who worked back in 1990s, 93 for Unified Port Management, one of the things we looked at back then between INS and Customs was understanding clearly the mission of each agency. And now that you have everything under CBP, and you have Border Patrol, and you have the mission of each one agency, I find it difficult to understand how is it that pulling inspectors away from a mission of facilitating commerce and trade, legitimate trade, really for a different mission, which is humanitarian, we understand the needs, that would be something that we would find acceptable, not from you all's point of view, but from the lawmaker's point of view. And I would challenge that is something that we don't want to get into the process of let's get used to it because it's going to continue to happen. I have an issue in regards to the question about why not more legacy folks? Maybe something as an option to look at for some of these missions that are short-term, hopefully in nature, to be used, whether it's from the process of adjudicating to other processes where you pull specialists to do one mission and you put them to do another mission. That would be one question. And the second question I would like, are you all looking at really beyond the port of entry, the checkpoint, 30-mile marker, 20-mile marker, 29, those lines as a result of perhaps a process down on the port of entry now creates another bottleneck at the checkpoint where we have 6 lanes, 3 of them for trailers and 3 of them for vehicles. Where do we fall into that play of having those lines of the flow of commerce through those checkpoints that start really with the delays down here in our ports of entry?
Jerry, thank you very much. I think you've laid out the conversation that we have every day. It is what's the most urgent need and what are the potential solutions that we can apply to that urgent need. As you know from your long experience, the first suggestion is not always the best suggestion, and sometimes you need to iterate. You need to try something different on day 2 or day 3. And I think that's what we've seen, and you saw it here in Laredo. So on our very first set of suggestions actually came from the Border Patrol themselves. And they were doing everything they could for several months before, and they don't do this very often, they raised up their hand and they said, "Uncle." We sat down as an agency and said, how can we solve this? And the most immediate, obvious solution was, we'll take the folks that are next door and send in the cavalry. And then we saw the wait times go up. And so very quickly, and this was not the plan, very quickly, we pulled people from other ports to come to Laredo, to come to El Paso, to get those wait times down here in these really important trade cities. We are continuing to figure out what the options are. And I think one of the things that I've always loved about working for Customs and Border Protection is that we are a very creative agency. We rarely take no for an answer, and we have a lot of flexibility in trying to solve problems. We're still in the problem-solving mode on this one. I think your suggestion about using retirees, legacy people, is in our solution set, but I'm going to take it back that's a suggestion that you here in Laredo would support. But I want to talk a little bit about your first question about why would you pull somebody from one mission to do another mission. So unified port management, pulling together border agencies, was in the works for a very long time, and it didn't actually happen until 2003. One of the things that our agency has struggled with is how do we integrate and pull the best from the Border Patrol expertise and technology and operations and field operations, technology and expertise, and trade expertise and operations and automation. How do we pull the best so that it is less about different missions? We're all focused on our one mission of border security, national security, economic security. And how do we take our skills and expertise and apply those to the broader mission? And what we're figuring out now is it doesn't matter whether you're in a green uniform, a blue uniform, or no uniform, but we have things to help each other towards the goal of border security. And so we're trying to use those skills and abilities in the best way possible on behalf of the American people.
And I'll say one thing. I think we're in agreement that, it's unacceptable for Congress not to act in this position. I think you've got a strong voice here with your representative. I think you've got two senators that are very strong voices. And, the acting secretary was on the Hill 2 weeks ago, I believe, testifying twice about, the relatively simple legislatively things that, we'd like to see that could help support our guys in the field in mitigating this crisis. But I don't want us to get in a cycle of, we've got a presidential coming up, so nothing is going to get done. And so I'm kind of putting when I used to work for the chamber hat on, your local voices matter in a way that we can go to the Hill all day and talk about our issues, but, voices matter to politicians when they're back in their district. So all that support is great, but I think we've got to make sure that they act to support what we're doing, because it's untenable. And we don't want to be in this position perpetually either. So thank you for your comments.
Good morning. My name is Eduardo Lozano. I'm a local broker here with the association also. I have a question. Talking about the 5% that we just saw the tweet last night, I'm already receiving calls from importers that before the 10th of June, they're going to start shipping double. If they ship 3 shipments a day, they're going to start shipping 6 shipments. Is CBP prepared to receive all the additional influx of shipments? Are we prepared?
Thank you. And I would tell you, your information, your intelligence about what's happening on the ground is absolutely critical to ensure that we are prepared. We were almost as surprised as you yesterday. We had a little bit of advance warning. JD, now you know why I wasn't at dinner. But not much. But one of the things that we have learned in this administration is that you have got to have your eyes open and your powder dry at all times because the situation changes so quickly. Are we ready? I would tell you not today, but tomorrow. But I will also tell you that the commitment of the agency is to do really two things. To make sure that the impact is as little as possible. There will be an impact, we know that. But I know Brad is already thinking about, and Armando and Albert are already thinking about, how do we handle this? What do we have to do this week? What's gonna happen in the run up to the 10th? So that's one thing. We will make it as little as possible. And I'm not gonna speak for Laredo, but I've seen it happen in the past where if there's a disruption and we have to increase hours, we do it. If there's a disruption and we have to put more people on, we do it. And so our commitment to minimizing the disruption remains. The other thing that we're committed to is making sure you have as much information as we can give you. We push very hard to be your eyes and ears within the government and to translate the policy decisions into operational guidance. So you know what you have to do to be compliant and what you have to do to get your cargo through, and we'll continue that.
And to what you said, it's absolutely imperative that we get that information from the ground. We see a lot in DC. We do multiple calls, but you've got various avenues in addition to the team down here in Laredo. You've got JD and others who can push information up to DC, and that helps incredibly. And I think we've got a good mechanism to share that information. So the more intelligence you can share on the impact of those decisions, the better.
And that was going to be my very point. Great commentary back. You're our eyes and ears on the ground, Eddie, and all of the brokers, the transportation providers. So if you're hearing that we can expect a surge in the next couple of weeks, I know everybody here from our side of it is taking note of that. Yeah, keep those channels open, push that information, and then our team can adjust accordingly.
So even though you've reached your quota on questions to CBP this week, we're gonna let you.
I got more.
It's about 10 after, so I think I know that all of these gentlemen have jobs to do.
I'm gonna start off with a compliment, just first of all.
Yeah, go ahead, JD.
And then finish off with, adding on to Ed's situation. But first of all, compliment. I'm glad everybody's here. EAC Smith, Bradley. I know Brad Hayes is just a local, so Brad Hayes, Brad Skinner, yeah. But the thing about it is, we've been trying to have you come down since December, and you guys finally made it, even though it's during the heat, but we enjoyed the visit down here and having everybody come down here. I want to thank the sponsors, Terry Schwebel, IBOC, LLC, I know Ricardo, and also Mr. Mercudo, Judge Mercudo Martinez. He's one of the board members. He's very supportive as well. They stand up, and as you see, it's evident in the hospitality that they provided for all of us. So I'm very receptive. I'm glad you guys enjoyed yourselves here, and I appreciate the meal, especially the dinner that the IBC hosted. Yeah, he did. So, but following through, I was part of Coac, and I'm also very appreciative because I deal more with the commercial aspect, and I was actually privileged to be with Ms. Smith, to be out there with the Border Patrol, and it was an eye-opening experience. I sit there. I know there's an immigration crisis. We all look at it and know we have debates about the wall, but there is a big crisis, and I know the Laredo sector is more evade and trying to run away, and they're trying to avoid the green suits, but it was an experience that we saw, especially being in my market 35, and to add to Jerry's situation, I know that you have a fast lane there, that it's being underutilized, but we still got to work on infrastructure, and that's something with the politicians that we have to work with. So, but as a messenger, I know that we could sit there and tell you a lot about the 5%, how it's going to affect as a community. We're against it. We're completely against it. And I know you can convey that message up to the top of where it needs to go to, in addition to, I'm sure, other individuals, and especially the country's going to come back, because we're expecting a retaliatory, something to happen from Mexico as well. In addition to what Ed was talking about, the influxes, it's not just his clients, but it's the entire community that you're going to have a big influx within the next 2 weeks, because nobody wants to pay the additional fees. So I hope you convey that message up there to the headquarters. And it's more of a statement, so you don't have to answer any questions, but I thank you and appreciate that you guys have come down in addition to all the sponsors as well. So thank you.
So let me throw a compliment back to JD for all your work in lobbying to come down to Laredo for the Coac. I think it was a good decision working with my team and Valerie and Florence and all that were down here from OTR to put this meeting together. Really appreciate all you've done and the rest of the team here to support this meeting and support today. And Jerry, echo our appreciation for you and Dr. Solis for these facilities for the last 2 days, which are beautiful. And really appreciate everybody else who's been very supportive. I think, again, the hospitality has been overwhelming, I think, quite frankly, for our team. Also want to thank our panelists, not me, but these guys who are out in the field doing it in a very challenging environment. So thank all of you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. I know that I consider it an honor to work for this agency and work alongside some of the most dedicated professionals in law enforcement and quite frankly in Washington, D.C. So I'm honored to be on the panel with all of you. So with that, we will wrap it up. Dr. Solis, would you like to make some comments?
Yes. Again, I would like to give my appreciation to this distinguished group. What you have done here to Laredo, you have re-emphasized the importance of what we do. As you noticed, we have a great group here of people that worked in trade, especially with the Custom Brokers Association, with Jerry Schwebel from IBOC, who's the founder of the Border Trade Alliance, one of the founders. And of course, with the mayor, we are very proactive in dealing with trade. And I wanted to, of course, recognize my two board members, Judge Mercurio Martinez and J.D. Delgado. I also want you to please stand up. We're going to make a pledge here to demonstrate how we work in unison in providing support and training. I know you have your big task of all the questions that were brought up about the challenges. Personnel is probably one of your biggest ones. Yesterday, ironically, I was asked by the people from Washington about the campus, about our buildings, that there's different kind of buildings, some old ones, some new ones, and some very, very old ones. Actually, there's a reason. Ironically, this is a campus that was established 150 years ago as a military base for different purposes. And here we are again, 150 years later, providing training and education for people to be able to improve themselves and quality of life. But we're also have transformed the campus into working with the different organizations. So we're here to pledge that we have so many buildings now that are being opening and available to offer them as offices for free to the Customs, U.S. Customs, to Border Patrol, so you can have a base here to provide for training and additional recruitment services for your organization here in our campus. We are opening up some new buildings here right across the other side, and that is why it's important that we are here to make this statement together with the community. We want to offer that service for additional training, education, and of course for the presence. In the past year and a half, we have the Laredo Custom Brokers Association. They have opened their offices here. That's been a phenomenal asset to the community. We're hoping to bring other organizations that are in the same, from transportation to other trade-related, to be based right here, right on the border. Like I mentioned, a campus that used to be here to defend the border as a fort, now we are one that is here to facilitate and increase, to make it better for the flow of trade and commerce. With that said, I just wanted to make that point here. I'm going to ask, of course, somebody who knows about trade and for the beginnings of this campus is our judge. Do we have a couple minutes, one more minute left, or about the purpose of our campus? But he's also a man that's been here as a county judge and has a different insight to what has taken place in the last 20 years. Laredo. Judge Mercurio.
Thank you very much, Judge Solis. And again, we are impressed for a tremendous amount of documentation and information that have been provided by you, particularly more so the experience that you have brought in to this presentation, to this panel. I want to make some additional comments, if I may. One of the main reasons, in my opinion, that has made now the port of Laredo the #1 surpassing LA to a large extent has been the port of Lázaro Cárdenas, and I think you ought to realize this. Why? That particular port of Lázaro Cárdenas, by nature, is a very, very deep sea port. And for those of us, or those of you that are not aware of it, it is so deep that the 7th generation of container ships that bring in 14,500 containers in one ship, okay? It actually, you would have a aircraft carrier on the opposite side, and you do not even know that it's already there. That's how mammoth and how big. And that, to a large extent, has been responsible for the increase of in the international trade activity coming through the Port of Laredo. And another observation, of course, is we're very fortunate that the Laredo has over 41 million square feet of warehousing alone on the roof, which is a big plus. And this is what makes, to us, of course, international trade does play a major role. It's already been acknowledged by our good friend, Mr. Jerry Schwebel. And it is because of that that we are very interested, very concerned, because it plays a major role in our economic impact here. So, again, thank you very much for being here. Dr. Solis.
Well, thank you very much. I know we've taken over some of this valuable time, but again, we are grateful for your presence, and we hope to continue having this type of robust and very productive dialogue. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it. That was great. And with that, I would be remiss not to also thank the mayor for being here. Mr. Sines, appreciate it. This is a great city. Thanks for all the hospitality. And also, I don't know that any Representative Clare's staff is still here, but a pleasure to have him join us this morning too. So appreciate your support and everything you've done. Thank you all. Hope you have a great weekend.